Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Ankerstar Wealth Morning Show. We have three exciting topics for you this morning. First of all, we're going to talk about some cybersecurity. As you remember, it wasn't that long ago, Palo Alto had that huge hit after earnings. Earnings were good, sold off on the forecast. We've got a couple of cybersecurity talks. We're going to talk cybersecurity stocks we're going to talk to you about this morning, and Mike will be peeling that back for you. Then I'm going to follow on with some questions I've gotten a lot on recently, and that's gift taxes. The annual exclusion went up to 18,000 this year, but what does this really mean? And what are some of the rules involved, and what applies, what doesn't? We're going to get into that, and then that naturally segues into 529s. So for a lot of folks, it's 529 season. Is how much money can I jam into the 529? There are some limits out there that you need to know about. And generally with 529s, you want to slow down just a little bit if you're going to put a large lump sum in there. But I'm going to peel those rules back for you this morning. Before we get started, remember this is a financial education presentation. You have to do your own due diligence for acting on anything you hear this morning. And there's more disclaimer information available at ankerstarwealth.com. With that, Mike, over to you. Let's talk cybersecurity.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Well, last Thursday, for any of you that were AT&T customers, although I heard it bled over to some other carriers, you may have noticed that your phone was down. I know I woke up, I saw the SOS on my phone and thought something is wrong. And my initial thought was cybersecurity. I was like, someone must have hacked the AT&T network. That's the only thing that could have caused it. That went through my mind. And then quickly, I'd say within an hour or so, my son had found himself a Wi-Fi network and connected and was like, "Dad, are you messing with my data network?" I'm like, "No, it's not me. AT&T's down." So was it a cyber attack or not? According to the USA Today, which I have listed here, it was not a cyber attack. So I'm sharing my screen. You can see now whether AT&T comes out with more on this. They said it was caused by an application and execution of an incorrect process we used while we were expanding our network. Basically a bug, a technical error. So it was not a cyber attack, which is good, because I kind of saw that as like, oh boy, if it was a cyber attack and they're getting through AT&T, we're going to see a big dip in these stocks because they're not doing their job, but they are. So also last week when Palo Alto came out with their earnings, as Steve mentioned, there was a good sized dip in the stock. And what I thought is I'd show is, and this is a leader among several cybersecurity stocks, and you can see that big old drop off on the 1 month graph, and you can see its return. Now, we do have some holdings in Palo Alto, but two of our ego stocks that we have focused on are SentinelOne and CrowdStrike. And I want to show the same kind of movement. Even though these stocks did not report their earnings, they dropped because of Palo Alto. So you can see that same dip and recovery for CrowdStrike here. And then you can see the same thing for SentinelOne, the recovery, and then one other holding that we have, which is an ETF that covers a lot of cybersecurity for maybe a lower risk account. Cyber, see the same thing. So all four of these securities moved in the same way. Palo Alto took the biggest hit. They dropped about 25%, where some of the other ones only dropped 10%. But either way, I just thought I'd show that to show that recovery. And one of the things, go ahead, Steve.
Nope, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one of the reasons why is that these move so closely is they're all looking at news from each other. So if Palo Alto thought earnings were going to be down, or they did lower their guidance, the markets say, hey, well, maybe it's going to be down for everyone. So that was the concern.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Mike. And one thing that's why you have that stock chart pulled up is how do you know whether to buy or sell a stock when there's a big hit across the entire thesis, if you will? And that's a question we ask ourselves here at Ankerstar Wealth is, okay, the stocks in the space all got hit. Has the thesis changed? Thesis being, long-term hold, cybersecurity is going to be around forever. Companies, have to view this almost as a sunk cost sort of thing. So that means buy more, right? If the thesis is unchanged. If the thesis changes basically off of the news that you hear, then you would consider selling. But Mike, did you, back to the AT&T thing, did you happen to hear any conspiracy theories that were out there as to what'd you hear? And then I'll go with what I heard.
I haven't heard much. But I will say on the good news, and I don't know that I'll report back here, but AT&T, as I am a customer, they did send me a message and said I would be getting some sort of credit to my account. So I don't know. I think my account was down 3 or 4 hours. I don't know, how much that will be, but they said will give me some kind of credit. I don't know what theories did you hear?
Well, the Elon Musk, tweeted out, if it's still a tweet on X, this is a test, right? Which spun everybody up, like China's behind it. They've knocked out AT&T. The next one's going to be the real deal when they come in and knock out the internet too, as well as all the carriers. So there was a lot of speculation as to what caused it, but the conspiracy theorists were running rampant. That's for sure.
Boy. Oh boy.
So, as they're like to do, right? All right, that was an exciting topic. I know I promised you 3 exciting topics. So now I'm going to switch to an IRS website. So, okay, how exciting can that be? Well, it's exciting when you have enough money to where you want to start giving it away to your family. So let's talk about that. Can you just give away, say you have, let's get crazy. Say you won the lottery, so you have your 300 million after, you won the $1 billion lottery and all the taxes and stuff, and you took the lump sum because you didn't talk to anybody like me who said don't do that. But you did it anyway, right? Because, people. And you have this money and you're like, I'm just going to start giving it all away to my kids. Well, you got to pump the brakes here. There's an annual restriction that you can do that gift tax free, and then you can go over that. You just have to pay taxes on it. You don't have to pay taxes on it now. You just have to record it. And everybody's like, Steve, I don't even know what you're talking about. So let's go through a specific example. So this is the IRS website on frequently asked questions. So what is the limit? First of all, well, in 2024, now it's $18,000 per year. So and it's per person. So say you're married, and say you have, a couple of kids. Say you have 2. That's easy for me to remember since I have 2. So Irene and I can give away $36,000, so 18 each of us, to each of our kids each year, and the government doesn't get involved, right? There's no tax implications. Spouses can transfer unlimited back and forth, right? You're considered one entity. So back to the kids. So say we want to give more than 36,000 to a child. Well, you can do that, but then you have to fill out this form, which is the form 709, the gift tax return form. Now, all you're doing is recording, say that because, we're being people and 36,000 isn't enough, we're giving 40,000 to each daughter in 2024. Well, then we would have to record that 4,000 of extra on to a return. And technically we would have to do it twice. Each person has to do it because this is dumb, but it is. It would be 18,000 for me with a 2,000 overage. I would record that, and then Irene would record the 18,000 for herself plus the 2,000 overage, and that overage of $4,000 would now be tracked and carried forward until both of us pass away, and then it's taken out of our estate. Currently, the estate tax limit's like 13 million and change. So if our estate at that time was over the estate tax limit of 13 million plus, then that $4,000 that we gave would then be taxable in our estate. Yeah, we're talking hopefully 30, 40 years from now, right? So it's kind of crazy, but that is how it's going. So how it's laid out there for taxes. And you're like, well, that's not going to happen. And I agree. For most people, that isn't going to happen. You're not going to end up with 13 million plus. But here's the gotcha. You're like, okay, well, I don't care. I'm just going to start giving away a bunch of money. Yes, I'll track it because it's required by law, of course. And then you give away a couple $1 million thinking, well, don't worry about it because I'm never going to be over that 13 million estate tax limit. And then the law changes between now and say 30 to 40 years. Could it change between now and then? Chuckle, chuckle. It'll change probably 10 times between now and then. If somebody has a great idea to bring the estate tax back down to $1 million, problem right now because you're now over that limit. So it's not that you can't manage yourself under the current rule. It's you don't know what the future rule will be. So that's why it's being tracked. So a little bit of a shenanigan there. There are some, what isn't, who pays the tax? First of all, it's you, the giver, the donor, if you will, pays the tax. You can arrange it to where the donee, the person receiving it, can pay the tax, but that's advanced stuff. Talk to a CPA on that. What can be excluded? Basically, tuition and medical expenses. Right. So if you're school or medical, you can give away unlimited amounts. There's some other stuffs in here that you can go through. But again, IRS, frequently asked questions on gift taxes. So where does this normally come into play for folks is in the Superfunding of a 529. So a 529 plan is an option for you to put money away, mostly towards your children. It can be anybody, but generally it's used for, parents for children to be able to put some money away for college, let it grow. And again, you're not, as long as you use it for education funding, you can let it grow. Basically you don't pay tax on the earnings, and then come school time and you start writing checks for big checks to institutions, you pay directly from the 529 and you're not taxed on all those earnings that you made. So that's kind of the general idea of why to do it. That's not the topic for today. If you are doing it and you want to put a bunch of money in, then there's rules to Superfund it, which is just you can bring 5 years of funding up into the current year. So let's talk about some math numbers right here at the top. Again, this is savingforcollege.com, so a legitimate source. 18,000 is our current 2024 limit. Okay, and that's per person. So you have 2 kids and you say, what's the max I can put in, this year without triggering any gift tax issues? Well, it would be 18 a person per child. So married couple is 2 of you, and then 2 children. So 4 times 18, so 3672,000 you could put in. So that would be the 36,000 each into their 529s, and you don't have to mess with any further thought on the issue. So that's the most you can put in without triggering it. What is the max? Well, you can Superfund it. So each person can put in 5 times the annual gift tax. You can bring those 5 years forward into current year, which is $90,000 per person per child. So, if you just happen to have a big fat bank account and you haven't put it to work yet, and you're like, I want to put that in a 529, you could put in 9 times $360,000 into 529. So 90,000 per person per child into the 529. Now you are locked out. If you Superfund to the max, you are locked out of funding that again until now year 6. So you can't have another good idea. Well, you're like, well, what if my number falls into, we'll just use 1 person and 1 child. What if the number falls between what I can do this year, 18,000, and that 5-year 90,000? Like, well, then you're, that can happen, right? So say you put in, we're just going to use the example of 40,000 because that makes the math fairly easy for me because it's divisible by 5. So if you put in 40, say you're a single parent, you put in for 1 child $40,000. You're like, okay, that's over 18, less than 90. What do you do there? Well, whatever you put in current year, that 40,000 is now considered split evenly across the 5 years. So technically it's 8,000 per year for years 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28. So subsequently, down the road, if you decide in next year, 2025, you're like, ooh, I have some more money. What's the max I can put in? Well, if the gift tax is still 18,000, then you would be able to put 10,000 in next year because you've already allocated 8,000 towards that year. If you're going to get into that, it's Excel time, break it out, do that sort of math. But certainly you do want to, as a strategy, sooner is better for your kids because you put money in and let it grow and you're not taxed on those earnings. But you can do, and you could even Superfund twice within 5 years. If it's smaller amounts, if you're away from the max. And that's where you have to break out the spreadsheet and look at that. I've done that. That's not the most easy math in the world, but Excel helps you out with those things. Let's see. These are last year's in the articles, 17, so I think 18 there. Prorated, yep, we talked about. Election is all or nothing. You can't put in 40,000 and then make deals as to which dollars are which, right? So lump sum is considered spread across 5 years. We already talked about that. You can do it more than once. There's no such thing as a joint election. So this is individuals, you and your spouse. There could be cases where one spouse wants to do the lump sum while the other doesn't. Yes, if you do the, say, 8,000 spread across the 5 years of the example we used, and then the gift tax goes up in the future, then that remainder that you would be able to plus up each year would also increase. There are some caveats if you pass away. And then other gifts. This is probably a bigger thing. So if you max out the 529, realize by law you can't gift them any more money during the year. And technically that would be the lunch money, or if you have your kids set up on an allowance or things like that. So do consider that you probably are giving money away to your kids during the year, so you may not necessarily want to go right to the Superfunding max. I do agree. How would the IRS know? Well, the IRS sets the laws and you're bound to follow them. That's how I would say. How would they know? Well, they probably aren't going to know exactly what you did, but certainly paint within the lines there and you'll be fine. So that's what we have for you today. Thank you so much for listening in, and we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. You have a good one. Bye.